Go like this. And I think it's
Great.
on the back. Okay. All right. So I am here with Christina Smith, and just making sure. Christina has a strong background in supporting English language learners in many different ways. But one of the ways that she's done it is by working with them and supporting them in learning math. And so, Christina, thank you so much for being here with us
you're
today.
welcome. I appreciate the offer.
Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done
bet.
in supporting English language learners with math?
You bet. Well, I've taught math to English language learners for about 15 years, 12 years at the secondary level. I created support classes for students that were struggling with the material with a focus on project-based learning. The most interesting part of that work was seeing struggling students thrive in a kinesthetic and tactile learning environment that was more conducive to their learning style. We have to address the language, but we also have to address the learning style of students to help them succeed.
Absolutely. So using real objects, manipulating things,
Absolutely,
things like
yeah.
that. How did you learn to support English language learners with the unique challenges of math?
Well, I worked in a school district that invested a lot of their resources into their teachers. It helped that I loved math, and I actually had a hard time grasping the subject myself. I had a teacher named Miss Kochek, and she inspired me to be a math teacher. Her enthusiasm for the subject energized me, and I could feel her passion, and I fell in love.
Oh, that's great. So you're a lover of mathematics, but at the same time you've struggled with it too.
Absolutely.
And you've experienced a teacher turning that around for
Yes.
you. I bet you hear this all the time. Math is the very subject that English learners won't struggle with because math is a universal language. How would you respond if someone said this to you?
I would say yes. Math is universal. Speaking's universal, listening's universal, reading, writing, they're all universal. Counting sheep or counting stocks, they all vary in some degree. Math is not universally taught, is what I would say. I teach American math. Our algorithms don't match up with many other countries. Math must be taught in a story problem so that learners can use the algorithm that they're comfortable with. There are many different paths to the same waterfall. I can show students my path and they can show me theirs. So in other words, math is language, story problems, and real life scenarios, not just an algorithm.
Okay, good. So what kinds of challenges with language do English language learners face when they encounter mathematics in U.S. classrooms,
All right.
especially in math word problems?
Let's try this. Quadratic equation, velocity, parabola, force, acceleration. And those,
You'll have to stop and I need to look those up.
Exactly. And those are just vocabulary words used in one problem, okay? Math is its own language. It's its own set of vocabulary. When we use math vocabulary and then add a context that's unfamiliar, let's say snow, ice, heater, toboggan, turtleneck, to a student who's from the Congo.
Right.
So we've got math vocabulary that's foreign, a context that's completely foreign. So the teacher has to be deliberate in the problems that they use and differentiate for their learners based on their levels or possibly their region.
Excellent. So what kinds of cultural challenges do English language learners face in math? I know you've kind of touched on this already, but could you say a little more?
You bet. Well, in some cultures, being quiet and not talking in the classroom is a sign of respect.
That's right.
Certainly not ours here in the United States.
We're very talkative, and we expect students to be.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We encourage them to question. We encourage them to discuss topics, and we encourage them to work in groups. It could be very easy for a teacher to think a student doesn't understand because they're not participating.
That's right.
So setting up classroom norms and modeling those is really important, and not to assume anything. Always ask and do your research.
Okay. So what other challenges do ELLs face when learning math?
Another challenge is understanding the lesson and not being able to share your knowledge because of the language barrier. So making sure that students are able to represent their work in different formats, like a project, a display, a model. Have students work together in homogeneous language groups. Remember, there's a time to teach language and vocabulary and a time to teach deep thinking on a subject matter.
Can you say a little more about that?
You bet. It's all about grouping. When you get students to group in heterogeneous groups, homogeneous groups, you can really get them to talk in a way where they can understand what you're trying to teach them, grasp the concept, and although they may not be able to word it in a way that you or any other students might understand, with that partner, they've reached that level of understanding.
Yeah. When you hear two English language learners, especially other students too, but English language learners talking through a problem, and they're saying it in a way that it's not the way you would say it, are you ever tempted to correct them, or do you just let them express it in a way that makes sense to them?
I just let them, my goal is to get them to talk and to get them to think. I'm not there to get them to think the way I think. I really want to understand where they're coming from. So I may question or dig a little bit deeper to try and understand.
Yeah.
But I really want to know what their thinking is.
Excellent. So when you work with English language learners, what strategies or approaches do you find most helpful in supporting them with learning and doing math? In other words, what are those things that you can't imagine teaching math without?
Grouping. I mean, to me, it's all about grouping. I would change my desks every single day. The students had no idea what they were walking into. Sometimes it was a U shape, sometimes it was small groups, sometimes it was rows, sometimes I needed them to just listen to me giving direct instruction. I really wanted to keep them on their toes, and this way they were in it together. Okay, so
Yeah.
I could be the crazy one, like, I can't believe she's doing this again. And in that way, we built community. They were constantly making new friends. And that's really what you want in a classroom, right? Community. And that's another cultural expectation that's very different in other countries. And so really trying to build that within our classrooms it's very important to me personally.
One thing I hear coming up, kind of bubbling up through your answer, is having a lot of students working in pairs, working in groups. So I'm guessing that discussion is a big part of your teaching of math.
Yes, absolutely. I believe in sentence frames, oracy, really getting the kids to talk to one another. We have this tendency to want kids to read and write, and that's how we assess them. And then our expectations are not met because they're not reading and they're not writing. Well, what we've missed out on is that oracy piece.
That's right.
If they don't have something to say and they don't know how to say it grammatically where they've had a lot of practice and confidence with one another, then they're going to struggle with their reading and their writing.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you assist other teachers, what kinds of advice do you give them to help them teach math to their English language learners more successful?
Well, I really, it's all about relationships and listening to students' stories. Everybody has a story, and it's important that they know that you care. When you're able to build those relationships personally, and they are, because they are kids, misbehaving or, acting up or something, you can give them that stern eye or that mom eye or, whatever it is that says, hey, I know you, cut it out.
Right.
If you don't have that relationship built, then you don't have that community in your classroom, which leads to chaos and horrible classroom management and all of that. So,
That's wonderful advice, because that carries across all the disciplines, everything we do with English language learners. Okay, last but not least, the students listening to our interview, they're all planning to either teach math as part of their work as elementary teachers or to teach math in middle school or high school. What would you suggest that they keep in mind as they work towards being more effective with teaching math to English language learners?
Always differentiate your instruction. The stand and deliver model of teaching is out. Be metacognitive about how you were taught. We tend to teach how we were taught.
That's right.
So if you find yourself forming a teacher-centered approach to learning rather than a student-centered approach to learning, change your game.
Yeah, I love that, and you're absolutely right. Unless someone interrupts us, including ourselves, we will simply do it the way we were taught, and it's often not the model that works best.
Yeah. Exactly. Use oracy, focus on sentence frames, teach the grade level standard, modify your grade level standard. If you don't teach at grade level, the student will never reach grade level. So always modify that. Hold students accountable, hold the bar high, they will surprise you. And remember, they don't need your sympathy, they need your expertise. And one last piece of advice that I would have is as we grow as individuals, we have to continually examine how our own life experiences, perspectives, and behaviors regarding culture, language, racial identity, and equity impact our own work in teaching and learning.
So being more aware of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Which leads us back to the beginning. Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Christina.
You're welcome. Thank you.